This event is really because of my own desire to pass along things that have happened in my life and opportunities that are possible as marketplaces change. I'll tell you in a story in a moment about one of the things that I've done, but I'm calling this event "Winter is Coming," and so we are we're in the economic world here, and the economic world has a spring and a summer, a fall, a winter, and I'm taking the position here that we are late in a train. We're late. Uh, that just reminds me to slow down. Those trains are a little slower than the cars. I'm always going at car speed. But the way economics works is that it goes through different cycles. I don't think there's anything controversial about saying that. And in a lifetime, as you go into winter, there's a few things about winter. I think some of the ideas that I'm going to say here and some of the things you hear are a little bit provocative, a little bit interesting, because for most of us, winter economically is a time when things are not so good. You have to sort of watch out for things. If you're in business, you may think, well, gosh, I have fewer customers, or things happen that are not always so good. Or if you have there's a lot of things that can go wrong and do go bad in economic winters. What I'm thinking, though, is that in a lifetime, you're going to get about 4 or 5 of them. If you have sort of like 7, 8, 10-year cycles of economics, and I'm sure Mark's going to talk about economic cycles, probably quite a bit of information about economic cycles. You only have a few in a lifetime, and I spent my life thinking that they weren't very good. My business would drop by 1/3, or in really deep ones, they'd drop by 2/3, and I'd have to live on 1/3 of my income, which was hard. Some of you probably had some similar experiences. So you don't necessarily have a very good relationship with a downturn in the economy if you have those kind of experiences. But what I've discovered is that my greatest opportunities happened during those times. Because in the spring, when things are starting to get better, you can make make some gains at that time. But if you make your choices of what's going to happen in winter when you don't want to make choices, and people are trying to avoid making choices or doing things, you make by far the biggest gains, and the greatest opportunities take place during this time. So this is really almost more about your point of view of what is often viewed as sort of bad times. And if you can avoid that they're bad times in your thinking, which is the point of this evening, each person here in this room will have opportunities, and the market changes, whether it's the real estate market or it's the stock market or any kind of market. Opportunities will occur if you have thought ahead of times they're going to occur. And so I'm going to tell you a story about the last time. This is, back 2007 to 2012, 13, depends on exactly where you measure it. We had 6 pretty bad years, at least in real estate. They're pretty awful. But I kept my eyes out, and one of the things that happened during that time, I didn't have a lot of money, but I bought a house, it was a condominium in Carpinteria for $1. $1. And in fact, it was better than that, because I said, this condo is going to have some negative cash flow. You need to give me $10,000 to take your property, which they agreed to. And that was my contract with them. And so they gave me $10,000 to take over their negative cash flow. That sounds like sort of a raw deal because you have a negative cash flow. Right now I have a lot of equity, and I have the tenants are paying for it. So now 5 years later, I'm a happy camper that I did this transaction. But an awful lot of people got frozen in 2010, 11, 12, 13. They had no idea when they were going to actually go back into the market again. So that's the thinking. The whole reason for this meeting is I'm not trying to sell anything now, but I may come to some of you when there's a downturn in the market, say, there's this really good deal here. Does anybody want me to call you?
No.
when that happens, because you might find that that was something, if I told you then, I have this good deal, you're going to think, the times are terrible, he's trying to make a sale, he's probably hard up. If you wouldn't think that way, and remember back to this day, if you had your mind in the right place, that in fact might be a really good deal. It will not occur that way when times are tough and it's hard to make a decision. But right now you can actually entertain that idea. Yes, okay. So I'm not going to be a grabby salesperson when that time comes, when sales are slow, and I told you that tonight. So when I call you in the future, you want one of those dollars. Yes? You're on the, okay. Well, if you have your mind open and your eyes open and you think that it's possible, then it's possible. If you think, no, times are terrible, I shouldn't do anything, I'm just trying to hold on, then it won't happen for you. And like I say, you have about 5 of them in a lifetime. And I hope to do much better with the ones that come in the future than the ones that I sort of thought were not so good. Now, that's just sort of what we're talking about this evening. Our first and our main speaker, we have 2 speakers this evening. We've got Mark Schneep and we've got Austin Lamson. Mark Schneep is probably the best known to you, and I'm going to introduce them one at a time here. Mark is currently the director of the California Economic Forecast in Santa Barbara. The company prepares forecasts. We're going to be seeing a lot of that right now. And generally you're in a room with about 300 or 400 people, and you're sitting a lot further away from the screen you are, and you can't really talk to Mark. But this evening, that's a little bit different. He prepares analysis for the state of California, for county governments, Caltrans, Kaiser Permanente, Blue Shield of California, California Association of Realtors, and the California Association of Governments. So a lot of people pay attention to his data and what's going on, and they have to use it for making a lot of decisions that affect all of us, and Mark is oftentimes the source of that. And he presents to a lot of big organizations and governments and corporations, and lots of big developers talk to him because they want to find out sort of where things are going before they commit a huge slew of money to things. And he was the head of the economic forecast department at UCSB, the project, from 1988 to 2000. So he was a professor, he's a PhD, worked at UCSB for a long time. He's gone out and opened a company that does these sort of things that we're seeing this evening. And so Mark is roaming around here someplace. He's right back here. Mark, I'm going to bring you on up now, and we're all going to get a little preparation for what's coming in the world. So thank you for being here, Mark.
Okay. So you might want to jockey for space here. So I'm going to talk about what your opportunities are regarding the housing market next year and beyond, okay? Knowing, as Scott said, that some dubious times may be coming. And I'll talk about that here. So I'm going to talk about what you should know, update on housing today, recession watch, what do recessions impact, and the forecasts. So the first thing is what you should know. Unemployment just dropped to its lowest level in 50 years. We continue to set records every month for job creation nationally. Record after record. I mean, the previous record was like 78 months. Look how far we are ahead of that. But we're slowing down nevertheless, and we went from 2.9% growth last year. Looks like we're running at about 2.1. So things are slowing. Okay, and then the trade war, and that's creating uncertainty. All right, so there's been an impact on the economy, but it hasn't been much. Hasn't been much to date. More or less the uncertainty of how long it's going to last and what it will be. But right now, things are actually not that bad. Stock market is continues to make all record highs. Okay, let's go. Here's the unemployment rate. There's where we are right now. There's where the last time it was that low. So you got to go all the way back here to the 60s. All right. So for a lot of people, they've never seen this low of a rate ever in the history of their lives.
Is that because of Trump?
Well, let me put it this way. Trump hasn't interfered with that momentum downward. Okay. So, and some of the policies may have helped a little bit, yes. But for the most part, you know, people say, is that Trump? What happens under the presidential administration? What I look at is a president is successful when he and his administration, or she, if it ever comes to that, and her administration, just don't get in the way, right? That's important. So we don't want Congress or the president to get in the way, and right now that has not happened. So that's been good. Okay, so let me show you this picture. I talked about a few things in the U.S. economy, but what about housing? And I may mention a few other indicators too, but what about housing? What's going on with housing? So here's a long history of home sales in California. Okay, it goes all the way back to 75. So we can see these, see it's volatile. You can see how it moves. It's in a volatile fashion. So that was the expansion after the 74, 75 recession. And that was the expansion after the 80, 82 recession. And then that was the expansion that occurred after the 2001 recession and going into the housing bubble, when everybody overbuilt and everybody was buying everything because you could get a loan for nothing, right? And there's where we are now in this expansion, the expansion since we broke out of the Great Recession. And we broke out here 2007, 2008, 2009. So by 2010, here's the expansion that we're in. And there's not much been going on compared to where we were in the previous several cycles. See? So, you know, we need to talk about that a little bit. But we did have that surge, that little surge. That was when we were selling all the foreclosures. Okay? So we were selling them for bargains. That's when you bought your, that's when they paid you.
Actually, I bought in 13.
13?
I was at the very tail end. But it was still worth less than the loan.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right here. Okay, well, you were lucky.
Well, but it was still less. It was worth less than the loan.
You should have bought in 2011, Scott. Would have been. They would have given you 20,000. Okay, so that's what those little surges were. You're included in that circle. So it was selling off all of the foreclosed properties, and so. But since then, you know, it's been nothing. And this has been nothing like previous expansions. That's been the weirdest thing. The housing market really has not contributed to the economic prosperity that we are realizing now in the last 10 years. It's really been the laggard. And the national picture just only looks a little bit better than this. Not much better. Okay, there's where we are now. That's 2019. 2019 is not done, but that's the pace that we're on. So that's where we'll finish if we continue at this pace, which we're likely to because we only have a few months left. Okay, so that's where we are. We're almost at recession level lows now. Okay, so what's with housing? The existing housing market is it's kind of sputtery. Nation, California. Selling prices are still rising, however. But there's particular metro regions where there's this divergence that's occurring between prices and income, and that's mostly in California. But it's happening in other areas too. You can't really see this at the broad national level. Everything's aggregated together, but you can see it in the coastal regions here. Okay, and so there is been some adjustment. So how do we interpret the housing market? What's going on right now? Particularly now when you see things are, everybody's got a job. Employment is at all-time high. Wages are rising. In fact, they're the highest they've ever been. Income's the highest it's ever been. Household debt's the lowest it's ever been. Household incomes are the highest they've ever been. We're in a golden age of the American economy right now.
Well, I have a question, but is the job market really segmented? It seems like all these technological people are being paid a fortune, so it looks like, the average wages, but are there sectors of the
Almost every sector.
employment is left that are people that
No.
are plain left out?
It used to be, but not anymore. Everything's caught up. Every level, every different definition of unemployment is at the lowest levels. Part-time, and whether you're in the job that you want to be in. That was a part of unemployment rate too, or you're just accepting whatever you can be. Are you getting part-time employment when you want full? All those things are at cycle lows. Wages are all at highs for almost everybody. That's why there's this big move right now to get robots going, so we can take over the mundane, repetitive jobs that we now hire labor for with robots. Okay, and I have a whole big talk on that, but I'm not going to talk about it tonight.
Do you think the plateau with the housing market has anything to do with the cap on property taxes with regard to certain states that are involved? Capping it at 10,000?
Yeah, the SALT issue, which is state and local government tax ceiling.
Do you think that has an effect?
And the property tax only 10,000. Yeah, it has some effect, but not like we're seeing, because even in states in which those don't exist, the market's just not doing what it used to do. Okay? A large part of it is because millennials, who are the biggest population now and the largest home buying segment theoretically, aren't buying. They're not buying, right? Why can't they buy? Why aren't they buying? They can't afford it because why? Because they've got student loan debt that is through the roof. Exactly.
They like the immediate. They want to go to Fiji.
But that's a big, but again, we're getting off track. So here, what's happening with the housing market? This is the other big issue too right now, particularly right now. Buyers are thinking recession. They remember the Great Recession, and they're growing more reticent about buying at the peak. Okay? They know what happened last time. They don't want to be stuck there. They don't want to say, I bought in 2020. That's like saying, I bought in 2007. I bought in 2006. They don't want that stigma. Okay, so that is this wait and see thing. Interest rates are falling again, positively impacting affordability to some extent, but housing prices just continue to rise. They continue to rise. They're not really leveling off much. So unsustainable affordability levels, that's what I call them, do ultimately manifest in price corrections in higher end markets, and that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing that. So here's some housing prices. I just threw a few up. That are high end, Westlake Village, San Jose, and Santa Barbara, right? And they're monthly, and I just took a small snippet through August of this year. So there's Santa Barbara. It's kind of moving lateral. It's not really gaining. And Westlake Village was kind of moving down. It's kind of moved up. But it's flat. And then San Jose is actually going down. Okay, we're seeing a lot of markets like this. The higher end markets are doing this now. Okay, so there is a healthy correction that's occurring in the higher end markets. All right. So let's talk about the next recession and the anticipated recession. We're not likely to see home prices really collapse, and I'll talk about this. See them go down, and we're seeing this lateral movement to somewhat moving down, but not collapse. The continuation of this lateral to modest lower direction is going to be more likely. So don't hold out for huge bargains in the housing market. Don't wait and see. I'm going to wait for a 25% drop. All right? That can happen, but I'll tell you why it's not likely to. There will be fewer buyers, however, and that's going to be less competition. Okay, therefore multiple offers unlikely, and if you're a must seller, you'll be less discerning. I don't know how my thing got off the end, but it did. So keep these things in mind when we're looking towards the next recession, which I'm going to talk about right now. Speaking of recession, let's talk about this. And as I said, I've talked about this. This is the most widely anticipated recession in history. Why is that? Okay, because one of the reasons is the expansion is, old. Very old, actually. And we all know that the sun doesn't shine forever. Okay. In fact, I like to show this picture. This is economic expansions, the length of an economic expansion. So after a recession, you have an expansion, then you go into a recession. Then you have another expansion where everything's growing, recession. So this is the length of the expansion in months going back to the 40s. So this was the 45 to 46 expansion, and then we hit recession. Then 49 to 53, et cetera, all the way to the current. So there we are. We're at 124 months and counting, still counting. This is through October. So I'm assuming we won't be in recession in the next 7 days. Okay, the previous records were the 60s and then the 90s. Okay, and we just beat the 90s. That was the when Clinton was around, and the tech boom and everything else. And then we went into recession because of the internet boom, and everybody was expecting billions of dollars from a website. All right, so that's one of the big issues here is that we're at the all-time record high in the expansion. So we know that things can't last forever. And the National Association of Business Economists survey from the most recent, survey that they took in August, 38% expect recession next year, 34 in 2021, 14 in 2021 or after 2021. So, you don't have 50% next year, so don't think it's necessarily going to happen, but it's a growing number. All right, that's what's important. TD Ameritrade says a 50% likelihood in 2020. And the chief economist of Vanguard says 30% chance in 2020. So they're all coming out with their odds and likelihood of recession, and they're all high, but at least they're not more than 50. It's not like a done deal, because we just don't have that many indicators that are collapsing right now that are giving us those signs. In fact, the stock market's practically at an all-time high, not far from it. Again, the unemployment rate's the lowest it's been. Incomes are still rising. There's still a lot of good things happening in the economy. Even our governor says recession is imminent when he and the legislature made the budget for 2020. They really put a lot of contingencies in because they think perhaps there is some recession. Okay, let's look to see what recessions impact. Okay, so here's employment in California, going a long way back. All right. So let me put the recessions here, the recessions I talked about earlier. So this is the 80 to 82 recession, the 91 recession, the 2001 recession, the Great Recession. That's the last one we had, and then you can see where we've been since then. So you can see right here that recessions, employment went down, employment down, employment down. So recessions, and there we are right now, right? So recessions impact jobs, period. We kind of knew that, but there's pretty good confirmation that it happens when you just look at the numbers, the data. So recessions impact employment. They're going to impact employment. So if employment's impacted, what else is impacted? Well, you're kind of making a big leap, but that is true. Income, first of all, because your incomes are going to go less money around, less spending, and with the uncertainty of a recession and when it's going to be resolved, you're probably not going to be wanting to make big purchases like maybe a refrigerator. but probably not an automobile or a house because, again, you don't know. And if you're out of employment, you're certainly not going to be making them. You're going to be less likely to. So that's why employment's key. Here's investment in new commercial and industrial structure. So this is new building, but not housing. New building of everything, but not housing. Commercial industrial structure. So let me put the recessions up. There they are again. So I'm not showing you kind of what happened pre-1979, but it was higher. So this is actually a low level right there. That really tailed off after the 1991 recession, particularly in California. That recession in California lasted a lot longer than the rest of the nation. And that's why you see this lingering on. Okay, it was hard to break out of that recession. That was a bad one. And then we had the dot-com recession. It wasn't that bad in California, at least. They tend to go sort of every other one. And then there's the Great Recession, real deep. And then here we are now. So you're likely to see recessions impact building almost in all cases too. Right? So they're going to impact building. So look for that to be the case. Here's housing inventory. Existing homes inventory. So this is like listings in California. Okay? Let me put these, I only have 3 recessions here because I don't have the data before then. But so during the recession of 91, you can see inventory got real high in California. And then it collapsed as people bought homes after that. And then it rose again a little bit in the dot-com recession, but that one didn't hit California badly. We kind of just went right through that, but inventory did go up. And then there's the Great Recession, inventory goes up. And here we are now, we're at really low levels, slightly rising. So if I was betting on this, given these, inventory is going to rise. You're going to see more listings. Why? Because sales are probably going to go down. And so that's the stuff that would normally sell that's listed is not. So houses are going to be sitting longer. So you're going to have more inventory. You're going to have more choice in the recession, which is good because you don't have much choice now. But I'll show you this picture for Santa Barbara. Here's home sales in Santa Barbara for single-family homes. This is just detached homes. Okay, and this goes all the way back to 1975. So you can see the full history of what happens in a recession. So let me put the recessions up. There they are. Big collapse in 80, 82. Now remember, if you were alive in 81, 82, 80, what happened? What was so indicative? What was so unique about the economy then?
Interest rates.
Exactly. Interest rates were, how high were they?
High.
Way over 10, 15.
15%. They were real high. So you can see what effect that had on getting a loan for housing. Big impact. And then the next recession was the 91 recession. And of course, sales went down there.
So all the jobs left.
Okay. Then there's the 2001 dot-com recession. Okay. That kind of went down, but not bad because, again, as I said, it didn't really affect California all that much. There's the Great Recession, housing bubble. And we can easily see that recessions impact housing sales. So sales are going to go down when we hit their next recession. Inventory is going to go up. Okay, that spawns opportunities for you, right? You're going to have more to choose from. And if sales are going down, there's going to be less competition for the existing inventory. No multiple offers, probably, or fewer. Okay, you'll be in the driver's seat. There's where we are now. We're up sales this year versus last, but not by much. Not by much. Okay, here's listings or inventory on the South Coast right here. Put these all up. And, well, you can kind of see what happened. I don't need to put the arrows up, but inventory was way up in that recession. It went up in that recession. It went up a little bit in the dot-com recession, not much. And boy, it just kind of was flat here. Nobody listed their house. I think they knew what was coming. And then here we are now. So we've been at this long level of very low inventory here. Okay? Very low compared to where it used to be. Nobody's selling their house. Boomers bought their house. They're going to die in it. Right?
Is that because we went from $400,000 houses to $1,400,000 houses? It's harder to sell, or you can't less many buyers?
Yeah, and then we don't want to have to reset our property tax either. So the Prop 13 is helping to be responsible for this. But you're going to get a little pickup of inventory nevertheless, because we have seen it. Okay? But there are other things at work. They're at play. Here's average days on the market. Time it takes to sell. So up, little bit up. They always go up. Takes longer to sell because you have fewer sales. There's more inventory, less competition. So recessions impact the time it takes to sell. You're going to have longer time to choose. You'll probably have a little bit more to choose from, and you'll have less people bidding, because recessions create uncertainty and people hold back and don't want to commit. Plus, they don't know how long the recession is going to be and how much more impact it may have on housing. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So there's the days now. As you can see, it's extremely low, it's extremely fast. If you're a seller, this is the time to sell, right? This is the time to sell. Housing prices are up. Takes no time at all to sell your house. Inventory is still very low. You're probably getting some multiple offers if you price right. So if you're a seller, sell. Sell now, before the recession. For the recession. It's clear. Data's pretty clear on this. Here's the price. Here's the price. Price back to 1975. Okay. So the price levels off after the 74-75 recession, kind of goes down a little bit in 1991. It didn't really go down much at all in the dot-com 2001 recession. It collapsed 40% in the Great Recession. And so here we are now at an all-time record high on the South Coast for home prices. Where do you think it's going to go? It's probably going to correct a little bit because we're already seeing that. And then when demand comes down and maybe inventory goes up and it takes a little bit longer to sell because those are all the characteristics, you're likely to see housing prices adjust, correct. So, I don't know that they're going to go down that much. That's why I kind of warned you ahead of time, unless it's housing based. We don't look for the next recession to be housing based because housing really isn't doing anything. Housing is not really contributing to anything right now.
I have a comment, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but when my wife and I moved here about 1974, the prices of houses here were the same as they would be any place else, because it was sort of like, well, what's it cost to build a house without
Right.
regard to the land?
Right.
But now that we're out of land, maybe that's what's pushing the prices through the roof.
Well, it's the fact that, we're really not out of land. We could rezone. It's the way the zoning has gone and the fact that we don't want high density. We could build a lot more housing in town. We could build a lot more out. We could build on Bishop Ranch. We could build 2,000 homes there. There's still land. It's just that we don't want to rezone it like we see other places. Okay? And we could build higher density in Santa Barbara or in Goleta or in Carp. Okay? Or we could rezone a lot of this ag stuff and put houses on it. But nobody wants to do that, of course, because of quality of life issues, right? And for that matter, we've been so slow in permitting other housing that's also been a slack of supply. So it's a supply-demand issue. We have tons of demand to want to be here in coastal California and very little supply. So that's really what it amounts to. Okay. Finally, I think I have median sell price to median price. So the sell price, the ratio of the sell price to the listing price. So if it's 1, that means the selling price went for the listing price. If it's less than 1, then the sell price went for less than the listing price. It can't be greater than 1 unless, well, it can be greater than 1 when you have tons of offers and everybody's willing to pay more than the list price, but not in the aggregate. You'll see particular cases of that, but not overall for the entire year. Okay, so 1 is my upper bound. All right? So does the selling price equal to the listing price, or is there discounts given? The seller takes less. So here is the 81 recession, 82 recession. So you can see that the median price went lower than than the top listing price. So it dipped, and it dipped also in 91. Okay, and there's 2001. It didn't dip. There's the Great Recession. It dipped big time, a lot. And then here we are now. We're almost at 1. So I imagine to see a little bit of a dip. Again, that's congruent with everything else. A little bit higher inventory, longer days on the market, sellers willing to make a few more concessions, take off contingencies to sell their home because it's taking longer and they need to sell. So that's kind of the thing that happens during these times. Right? Okay. Sentiment, overall consumer sentiment. How do people feel about the economy? That goes down during recessions. You can see, I'll just put these up real quick. That's my daughter bugging me. Okay, I didn't tell her I was here. She's 17. She goes to Dos Pueblos and I don't know what she wants. So, yeah. So here you can see that consumers get worried and don't have as positive a sentiment in recessions. Low, 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 starts going down. It's really low back then. But now we're really high again. So people will start to worry. They'll get anxious. They don't like the fact that they're out of a job, that their incomes are going down. Recessions do impact sentiment. And sentiment right now, it doesn't look very nervous because sentiment is normally close to an all-time high, although there's a lot of ebb and flow right now, a lot of volatility in consumer sentiment right now. So consumers may be getting a little bit nervous. It's still high, but it may be getting nervous. What are they nervous about? They're nervous about their jobs today and in 6 months, their wealth, and their wealth means their stock market positions and their home values. So again, if their home values start going down, they will get shaky. And that's why they get nervous during recessions, because they fear for their home values and their stock market portfolio, for that matter. Here's stocks. That was the recession, 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 recession. You can see stocks respond to recessions. We all know that, but there's the evidence. And there's where we are now, right? The S&P through October is near all-time record high. So this is likely to tank too. So you're going to see when the stock market goes down, then your wealth starts to erode, at least your paper wealth, your book value. And then you start to pull back. You don't feel very comfortable, particularly on a huge purchase like a house. So that's another reason that inventory starts building and demand goes down. We talked about you lose your job, but also even if you don't lose your job, you're going to lose some of your wealth. And then you're going to pull back on housing. Okay, so just know that this is all coming to some extent. Okay, real quick, I want to just show you these and then I'm kind of done. But here's Zillow. Here's the prices in some of these towns, and that's the current price that you see there. So current price in San Jose is over $1 million. And Zillow has the price forecast for San Jose going down. Okay, 4% next year. That's what Zillow has. Here, let me get through these and then. Here's Cupertino, Bay Area again. 2.1 million is the median price there right now. Okay, down 8%. So Zillow has them down, adjusting, correcting. Here's Santa Barbara. Zillow has, I went back really quick. Zillow has the Santa Barbara down only 1.3% next year. I have Santa Barbara down a little bit more than that, but not much. The median price is about 1.2 million. In fact, if you look at all the higher end markets, here they are. Bel Air, Santa Monica, Manhattan Beach, Newport Beach, La Jolla, Avila Beach up in San Luis, Carmel Valley, Half Moon. But just pick out your favorite high-end area. Okay, there is the forecast by Zillow. They're all negative. All the high ends are negative. So there is a correction that Zillow does see forthcoming, and it's obvious why. Because we're going into a softening period, and people are reticent to buy in this period. And the stock market may make some corrections and be more volatile, and people get worried about that, and sentiment starts to erode. And so that's kind of the 2020 look here. Now, if you're in markets that are much lower end, like Fresno, then 242,500 is the current price there. 3.6% appreciation by Zillow. Okay, and here's another one, Santa Maria, up 2.3. And if I look at any low-end market like Oxnard or inland areas like the Inland Empire or Central Valley or even some Sacramento areas, they're all going up because they're all low. Anything under about 550,000 going up. Everything over that, moving lateral, going down. Going down. That's the forecast. There's Oxnard right there. Up. And there, 503. Okay, so real quick, there's 4%. Those are jumbos and conventional, traditional conforming. There's we are through October 11th. Mortgage rates are extremely low. So even in extremely low times that we're seeing right now, below 4% again, we still can't get the housing market really moving fast. People are not putting their house up for sale, and prices are still very, very high. Okay. Conclusions. So let me give you the conclusions. Winds of recession are blowing. The actual event is a year or maybe even more, because we really don't see the antecedents of that occurring so quickly. The housing market will continue to modestly correct. The seller's market is now before the slack in demand occurs. We see some slack in demand, but not much, because it doesn't take long to sell things. Are you still getting multiple offers?
Only a few.
Only a few.
Yeah, it's probably 1 out of 8 or maybe even less.
Okay, well that's still not bad.
We would hit 30 and 40% in
Is that right?
much better markets.
Okay.
It's nothing close to this.
So there's a slowing there too. So we are seeing these effects on the housing
And
market.
mostly that's sub $1 million.
Right,
Affordable stuff.
right. Affordable, whatever that means here. Okay, so it's a seller's market now still, although it's starting to turn. Used to be a bigger seller's market a year ago, but things are changing. So if you're a seller, you need to price to sell now, before you have to price significantly lower to sell then. That's the case. That's the message. The buyer's market is coming, right? As the economy softens, more opportunities for buyers emerge, and a lot fewer for sellers. So there'll be more inventory, less competition. There'll be a growing likelihood of seller concessions and less contingencies and less conditions put on the house. So you got to be ready for this. So readjust your stock portfolio so you're not hit big time with any wealth decline, collapse, because you had all your wealth in the wrong stocks right now as we go into a recession. Buyers or sellers, however, should also buy stocks when we hit the low recession. That's when you readjust back. So think about housing, selling and buying during the recession, but when you're at the low point of the recession, or at least you're at a very low point, start to think about buying stocks. Increase your wealth. Okay, I think that's it. I have this boring kid here that we need to get this recession that we're not even in yet over with. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Okay, well, one of the things that we also have as we're going to have a brief presentation, just thinking about if you're preparing for the possibility of making a move, if there is a downturn in the market, or even preparing before there's a downturn, one of the things you may look at is borrowing money. So we're going to have Austin Lamson come up and talk to us a little bit about about what lending is looking right now, and maybe a little crystal ball gazing on her part here. She's been a local lender here for the last 10 years, absolutely best known to me as someone who really knows what she's doing and takes care of the customer. Not always something you get in the world of lending. And she helps people see the big picture, help them go through the things that have to deal with loans. And she's really an ally for people who are in the financing process. And I see a lot of lenders in town, and I'm just amazingly, just come on up, Austin, because she's just really good at helping people. I see it so many times. So Austin, come and help us to know a little bit about what's going on in the financing world.
So I'm Austin Lamson. Thank you for having me. I've been in lending for 21 years, and I know you may look at me and laugh at that. I was 12. No, I was 18 when I started. And I've been in mortgage lending since 2002. I was in operations. I was a vice president of operations for Santa Barbara, Westlake, Ventura, and Simi Valley for Bank of America by the time I was 30. So I am a big fat nerd. And thank you for the kind introduction, because my goal is really, let's talk about big picture and then let's back into the nitty gritty, right? The answer may still be a 30-year fix with 20% down, but why? Why are we asking those things? And so for preparing for tonight, Scott kind of gave me some ideas of what we want to talk about. And so again, since we're talking about that big picture, I want you to think about where you are now and where you want to be in 5 and 10 years. My friend Vern asked me a question of how do you get a loan if you don't have income? And so that's one of the things I want to key in on. So where is your financing needs today? Because money is cheap, as Mark said, but it's going to get more expensive. That is just a thing, right? There are cycles. We saw the pretty arrows. That will happen. And mathematically, when there is a 1% increase in interest rates, that you therefore qualify for 10% less from a price perspective. So that's a really big deal. So I want you to look at what your financing is and what your financing needs may be, not just for the house that you're in, but where you may need to be, or maybe where you need to help family with, because we see more and more of those types of things. So one of the things we want to talk about too is, what is that cash? What does that look like? Is it a traditional financing term? I always tell people to go conservative, but don't pay for what you don't need. I love a good old-fashioned 30-year fixed rate, definitely. But if you do not intend on using that product for that long, why are you paying for it? I would never tell somebody to take maybe something fixed for only 3 or 5 years, because you're going to blink and that's gone. So I like these sweet spots depending on your financial plan of maybe fixed for 7 years, 10 years, 15, or back to 30, just again, depending on how long you think you're going to want that cash out there. So another thing that I want you to think about is, what types of credit are available on the secondary market as well. So you hear lots of lines of credit. They used to be so easy. There was actually, I remember, because I survived the Countrywide Bank of America takeover, so not fun. But I remember one of these loan officers, when we were escorting them out, not in handcuffs yet, but when we were escorting them out, he had this postcard he would send to clients with a little reflector. It says, if you can fog this mirror, I can get you a loan. And it was kind of that true. I mean, it was that bad. And one of the things people kept selling, besides these negatively amortizing loans or these quickly adjustable or these sneak up on you type payment things, are lines of credit. Lines of credit are typically based on prime, and a lot of people see them as a checking account against their house, a credit card against their house. And that is a true statement. But it is not a long-term debt strategy. And as you get into a recession, those line of credits will be frozen. Winter is indeed coming, right? So I remember their clients where you'd have these automatic valuations like the Zillows of today that servicing would run. And they'd be like, oh God, your value dropped $300,000 overnight. We're just going to cut everything off. And you're like, well, it didn't. That is an algorithm you ran, right? But what is that? Because a lot of people are like, nah, I'm good, Austin. I got $100,000 in my line of credit. I can just write a check when I need it. How are you going to repay that debt? How will that debt change as prime changes? How will that debt change as value changes, right? So what kind of access to credit do we have now? And what will that change? One of the things Mark touched on is, with the Great Recession and kind of why did it take a while maybe for property values to increase back up? What did that kind of look like? And it's the way that you qualify for loans. So back to my buddy Vern's question is, how do you get a loan if you don't have income? So one of the things that was put into place by Dodd-Frank, the Dodd-Frank Act now governs pretty much everything I do every day except for brushing my teeth. And it is called the ability to repay. As a lender, I must prove that you have the ability to repay. If I cannot prove that by the credit package, the machine I'm going to rack yourself through, you can come back and sue me for a minimum of 3 years finance charges. That's a lot of money. That's why it's painful. So we're going to look at not just what your income is today, but what it's expected to be for at least 3 years out. I do not know why it is 3 years. It has been 3 years for about 15 years. But what is that going to look like? Now, I can't ask you, are you going to retire anytime soon? But if you literally stop working, then that is a problem in the loan process. So how do you qualify if you don't have a standard W-2 income? Well, there's a lot of alternative products out there, but we're going to look at things like, do you have an income stream from assets, right? Can you set up an IRA distribution to generate retirement income? Do you have pensions? Is there non-taxable income out there, right? So when I'm asking you these questions of how are you going to qualify in the future, I want you to think past that tax return and where do you need that debt? Where does those numbers back into? One thing I'll tell you from a nice little nerdy standpoint is the rule of 45. So your gross income at 45% is what you can have and maintain for most loan programs from a debt qualifying standpoint. So if you make $10,000 a month, all of your monthly obligations on your credit report and housing has to equal about $4,500, right? So I know that in the future, if I have a house now and maybe I want to take some money out of it, buy something smaller as maybe an investment property, right? I can use some proposed rental income to qualify over here. I know that all those numbers need to be within a certain debt to income ratio. That could be something you qualify for today, but maybe not in 3 or 4 years, right? Maybe you're not going to have that job. Maybe you're actually going to sell this house. Maybe you're going to turn it into rental. Your kids are going to take over the payment. What are those factors coming down the line? I also think it's good to manage debt, right? I'm an econ nerd. I was teasing Mark about this. That's what my degree is in. I think it's super fun. Like when that whole idea that there is no such thing as a free lunch, it's really got me in junior year in high school. I just went for it, right? So what is your intention with the debt? Do you want a free and clear house? I don't know, do you? Do you want to take out debt now and because you're going to get a kickback, shall we say, for any benefits from a tax perspective of writing off that debt on your Schedule A of your tax returns? That's a lower, therefore, interest rate you're paying, right? If you're paying 4%, feels like 3%. If you're at a 25% tax bracket, right, we're going to take that number off. And can you grow that money somewhere else? I am not telling you to take money out of your house. What I am telling you is, what do you want to do with that debt? What does it mean to you? Is it more that you have assets that you can use and invest in something else, that you can take the trip you want to do, buy another property? Or is it like, I want just my nice little taxes and maybe my insurance, and I don't want a single thing other payment? Okay? So those are the conversations I want you to start thinking and start having. The other thing that the buy now or wait, he touched on millennials. So let me give you some reference points. So I do about 300 loans a year, close about $100 million a year, have for the past 5 or 6 years, okay? So I talked to a lot of different people. And I talked to these nice little millennials, and I do have quite a few that work for me, and man, it is a different language. It is a different language. I don't even know what that is, that abbreviation. So, but the main thing that they tell me, it's not necessarily the student loan debt, because again, they're going to be able to qualify for that. They've got that tech job making $200,000 a year. It is they want the flexibility. They see the house as a ball and chain. Most people I talk to say, well, I want a property that I can make sure that my payments are covered by rent if I ever just decide to take off to Fiji. That's a true statement. Fiji just keeps coming back up now and then, right? So I don't know. Somebody keeps spreading that rumor, right? And I said, well, that sounds nice, but I want you to understand what that debt means to you. What do those payments mean to you? Because not to get too into the tax weeds, and I am not a tax person, but there's a very different thing that you write off on your Schedule A, your itemized deductions, versus your Schedule E as rental properties. You have a rental property. Vern's going to get in on it. He's a retired CPA. Tell me about it, Vern.
I only want to comment on this, but don't take what I say as the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But, our government, or Trump, messed around with our tax laws, and a lot of what we got is illusion, like there
Mm-hmm.
may be limits or caps or things on your tax deduction now that suddenly surprise you. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
find out that you're suddenly paying higher taxes than you thought you would.
I will tell you the worst impact of that is I have clients that she's a vice principal at a high school and he is a science teacher also at a high school. They had a $10,000 tax bill because they can no longer write off the state and local taxes, the SALT as he called it, on the same way. And also because they don't have 2106 expenses, so educator expenses, nurses, firemen, people that had unreimbursed employee expenses don't get to write that off. But when I'm talking about I want my payment to be covered by rent, that is a different conversation if you're looking at what you write off from an owner-occupied perspective versus writing it off as a rental property. Rental properties, you get a lot more write-off, and there is no limit on the amount of interest you can deduct on a rental property. Owner-occupied now, it's now $750,000 unless you have grandfathered debt. You buy a new house for $1 million, 25% down, great, you're writing that whole thing off. You put 20% down, you're not writing it all off anymore. But on a rental property, you are. So a lot of people come to me and say, I have this big house. And no offense, one of us is not getting out of here alive sooner than the other. So I know I'm going to have a step up and that I'm going to be able to sell it when that person passes without a lot of capital gains. So we're looking at taking money out of that house now for that rental property that whoever wins that fight, I don't know. Maybe there's food poisoning involved. I don't know who's going to have that one. But they're going to be able to take that equity now, buy a new property, call it a rental property, write that off, get some bigger write-offs, and then when somebody dies, they're going to get the step up from a capital gains perspective. Not to be morbid, but those are the conversations I get to have. Right? Anything else, Vern?
No, that covers it well.
All right. So the next question, yep,
So
please.
you're saying with a rental property, there is not a cap on the property tax deduction. Is that, am I hearing you correct?
So on Schedule E from an IRS tax form, you write off mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, depreciation. You want to be careful on that because if you do a 1031 exchange, you may have to recapitalize it. But you're going to write off a heck of a lot more than on your owner occupied where you're writing off interest and up to $10,000 in state and local taxes. So you're going to be able to leverage that asset you have now into an investment property somewhere else, maybe, or in town, right? And do it that way. But there is no limit. You could put $1 million mortgage on the investment property and write that all off, whereas you're going to be capped at $750 for owner occupied. Yep. So the next question is, do I refinance now or wait? This mythical recession, this mythical rates are going to drop, values are going to drop. Oh my God, the sky is just falling, winter's coming. What am I going to do? Hindsight's 2020, which is, I think, what we're going to call next year, right? Next year is going to be a year of hindsight, right? Hindsight's 2020. If you are happy with the payment and it works in your financial plan, do it. Don't wait for this bottom of the barrel thing. It's always going to be in the rearview mirror, right? You don't know the data. You know the data backwards. You notice his chart stopped at today. It didn't really go forward. We don't know about that yet. So do you refinance now or do you wait? Well, both. What are those needs? Do you buy now or wait? Well, both. What are those needs? Every single person I meet with are like, oh, well, the market's just going to crash. And I'm like, well, I can tell you some math of why you shouldn't wait. But if you like it and you're comfortable with it, go for it. because what you're buying is your peace of mind, right? We're not buying necessarily, we shouldn't always just buy to make $500,000 off of a $1 condo sale. I still just gets me every time he says that, right? So what are the cash flow items you need? Is there deferred maintenance on your property? We did a situation about 2 years ago now where the wife really needed some memory care. Like she was going downhill and fast, and bless her heart. And they had a free and clear house. And the husband's like, I want to stay here longer, but she needs care. And I have no other income. What do I do? So we took the money out of the house. We got her into Valverde. She was able to do that. It gave him about $100,000 left so that he could still live in the property. She did pass eventually a year and a half later. He sold it and moved on with his life. What do you need in the future? None of us knows exactly, but you might know if you need a new heater. That is a thing. What is the deferred maintenance you need? What are those other things you're going to be calling to order? The last thing I just want to touch on real quick is I mentioned hedge for longer than you think, but don't pay for what you need. Loans qualify differently now. Adjustable loans do not qualify at the interest rate that they advertise. They qualify at 2% above that interest rate if it's fixed for 3 or 5 years, and what's called a fully indexed rate if it's fixed for 5 and 7. So when you come to me and you say, another true story, Austin, I was quoted this rate and they're going to give me this loan. I'm like, gosh, when I look at your tax returns, you're going to qualify for this program instead. No, I want the lower rate. 2 weeks later, I now have to put $150,000 more into the property than what you told me. Yes, I know, because you don't qualify at that rate that they told you. You qualify for above. So if you're looking at anything into the future, what are those standards going to mean and how do you play with those nuances? So what I've basically told you today is think in the future, hedge for longer than you think, but don't pay for something you don't need. Always look forward as much as possible. Hindsight's always going to be 20/20. But I want to know what other questions you have. Anything that I can key in on or address? Why is it so gnarly to get loans? No. Good. Well, thank you again for your time tonight. I appreciate the opportunity.